Hi, Kat.
Hi, Rev.
Are you ready to do just like a last episode recap of A Court of Thorns and Roses? Maybe cover some stuff that we didn't cover, that we didn't get a chance to cover, or just some last thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely am.
Do you want to go or should I
Sure.
go?
I have a question I've got lined up. So, something we've talked about offline and possibly mentioned throughout the season thus far. Do you think this book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, can be read as a standalone, or do you think it needs the series to hold it up?
There are a lot of times where we have read a book where it is just book one, and we're like happy we got book two. There are also how many times that we have read a book and it has been just book one, and we're like, oh my God, why? Why? Why did they make a book two? This was the worst and it was a fail. There is the potential that this book could have been so good on its own and we could have wanted a book two. So I'm going to say yes, we could have read it as just a book one and been like, is SJM ever going to make a book two? It would be so good. What do you think?
I agree. I think that this book ends in such a way that we get, if not a happily ever after, we get a happily for now. Our hero and our heroine have defeated the bad guy and they are off living in the spring court. So that's why I hesitate, because we have not processed Feyre's trauma. I think this book does stand alone, but it does not complete the story, because we know Feyre repeatedly says in the last chapters, I'm never going to get over this. I'm never going to forget about this. So yes, I think it can. I think, and I know people who have only read the first book and they're like, it just wasn't for me. But how many times have we said, you have to get to the second book? How many times have you said, this is a trilogy of a single story? This is Lord of the Rings. It ends with Sam and Frodo separating from the Fellowship. It doesn't make sense to end the story there. It doesn't make sense to end Feyre's story here.
I do agree with that. However, if it would have been a terrible tragedy and A Court of Mist and Fury would have been an epic fail, I think you and I would have wished she just ended it there. And I will take it back to this one book series that we read that has to do with a stalker. Book two, big fail. Big fail.
Well,
And I think it would have been best if it would have just been left to book one.
But I also think of Crescent City. I think Crescent City 1 is a great standalone. I do not think you need anything else from the end of Crescent City 1. Crescent City 2 is where it becomes, okay, now I have to read Crescent City 3.
I'm going to text you because I don't want to say it out loud on a podcast. This book series, that book one was phenomenal. And I think it turned into what should have been a 2-book or a 3-book series and then ended up so many books, and it was a fail. I think it is a tricky subject when you start expanding upon your series. How far are you willing to take it? What do the readers expect, especially after Throne of Glass? What were we going to think of ACOTAR after Throne of Glass? Like when she expanded and then got 8 books?
They were being written concurrently. But I think this is one of the things that separates Sarah J. Maas from other writers, is she might not know the ending, but she knows her end pairing, and she knows a version of the journey that takes them there. I think she knew that Feyre and Rhysand were going to end up together. By the end of book 1, she knew book 3 ended with them together. And I think she knew she had to villainize Tamlin So that's how we get that arc happening. But I think this book could be read alone. It is better read total. I think other series end with cliffhangers that make you have to. I think that is what the romantasy genre has done. You know, when you look at romance novels, for instance, and there's a trilogy, it is usually three brothers. It is, look at Bridgerton. It's the Bridgerton family. That's what the series is.
Also, Lights Out.
Right. Lights Out.
Or Butcher and Blackbird.
Right. These are all individual standalone books within the same universe. I think that's what you can do here. But the romantasy genre, this is where the fantasy aspect of it comes in, is these grand, long tales that have to take 7 books to get out. What started off as a trilogy has now become 5 books. Go for your pin.
So the question is, would you have been satisfied if this was just a book on its own? After reading Throne of Glass and knowing it's the same author, SJM, would you have been satisfied if this was just ACOTAR and nothing else after?
I probably would not have picked up her next series, but I would not have been disappointed because at the end of the day, I got my happily ever after, but it wasn't very satisfying. I would have been happy that this book came out. I think of, look at Rebecca Yarros when she's writing Fourth Wing, but in between each book, she is writing a contemporary romance. I think I would have viewed this as Sarah J. Maas taking a break from Throne of Glass to just kind of sharpen her skills, change her skills, get a different world in there so she's not bogged down by this one thing. Yeah. When you were reading this book for the podcast, we both have said repeatedly, we're reading with a different lens than reading for pleasure. Did anything surprise you when you were reading this?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. There are so many things that were repetitive themes that when I read it for pleasure, I was reading to learn about Feyre and about Tamlin, just for ACOTAR. I'm not talking about the whole series. When I'm reading it now and reading it through the lens of a podcast and under the lens of saying, I want to make an encyclopedia, that put an entirely different lens on what I was reading and made it, honestly, it made it more like school, like I was reading a textbook, and made it less, I'm not going to say less enjoyable, because I enjoy all of these reads. I had to say, I am coordinating this point with this point, and I'm going to have to put that in the encyclopedia. So it was definitely different, and I would really, really struggle, Kat. I would really struggle to tell you which one I enjoyed more. Did I enjoy it more when you and I read every single SJM book in 2.5 months in 2022? Or do I enjoy it more now, knowing everything I know and getting to reread and like try and connect the dots? I don't know which was more enjoyable. I think they're enjoyable in a different way. I don't know. I have the same question for you.
I agree. One of the things I really liked about this reread was being able to take the time to focus on just 5 chapters at a time. I feel like I understand the text more. It's easier for me to remember, like, when was Calamni? Okay, it wasn't episode 1. It wasn't episode 2. I know. It was episode 4. I got it. And I think being able to analyze those chapters and focus in on these things that authors put things in the book for a reason. They slave over these books for years. And to be able to say, Feyre talks about the forgotten gods a lot for someone who has forgotten these gods. I feel a little bit like Feyre when she's overhearing them talk about how Tamlin has a heart of stone. You just kind of forget, why does magic smell so tangy and then suddenly it smells like jasmine? That's these cool little things. I think it's A little bit like when we all read Crescent City for the first time and we're introduced to Rune and we're like, wait a minute, there's Rune Mountains in Akatar.
Rune Mountains.
What does that mean? That's what I feel like this podcast has been. But it's also things that surprised me have been, I mean, I didn't think this would be my Lucian read, and yet here we are. But I think also it's getting to look beyond the text and compare it to other mythology. The story of the amarantha plant and the rose. Being able to look at other histories and mythologies and like make these connections that I would never make if I'm just reading for pleasure. So that has been a huge surprise for me.
I have so many questions, but my next question I feel like is the most important question I'm going to ask you. Do you think I'm just going to say SJM does not know who we are. She will never know who we are. We are not that important. But if, let's say, you and I get the chance to travel to New York City and meet her, and then she ended up seeing our podcast and we were lucky enough, do you think that she appreciates that we've taken this deep dive into her works and tried to do what we've done? Or do you think she's like, oh my God, could you guys just leave me alone? I was just doing one book in a series. I didn't know it was going to be 5. You guys are holding me accountable.
I was just doing my job.
Like, what do you think she would say?
I think she would be very flattered to know that 2 people developed a friendship kind of with these books. Because that was kind of the first time we really became friends.
Dude, that's it. Like, this is what we did together for the first time. We read
this was our
book
first
series
books together.
Our first 2.5, 3 months of friendship, we read 16, 15, 16 books. Ugh.
Yeah. But also, when you're writing a book, it takes years. It takes months and years, kind of depending on how fast you write. And you are totally in that world. You wake up and you think, well, I'm having a croissant and a cup of coffee for breakfast. What would Rhysand be having? Can I make that into the story? No, that doesn't make sense. But maybe it does. And I think Sarah J. Maas does that when she always does these little chapters at the end of the books. You know, the Crescent City has all of these different chapters. Or these alternate endings later on in Akatar where we see Azrael with the necklace or Cassian with the necklace that he throws into the river. And she'll say, don't pay attention to this. This is just me having fun. I think she would be very flattered to know that 2 people have sat and put so much energy into her world and have loved it enough to share with the internet.
You don't think she would take any offense to when we talk about something like Vaughn?
No, because I think I've seen her in interviews where she's laughed about it and been like, yeah, I totally forgot about that. But I think that's one of the reasons why. So there's currently a topic in the book talk community about, do you tag authors? There was someone who was tagging authors, talking about how awful their books were and that they were going to criticize everything that they do. This is part of a bigger conversation. But I think anyone who watches this podcast or listens to this podcast will see that this is being created out of a love of the genre, a love of reading, a love of these characters. I named my cat Azrael, for heaven's sakes.
I know.
Because of him.
Yes,
right?
you did.
Like, Sarah J. Maas will always be a part of my life because my cat is named after one of her characters. I think even when we come with criticisms, we are not saying, this is just stupid. This is the worst written thing. What we're saying is, I've seen this author create Throne of Glass, the 13. I've seen this author develop all of these things. Maybe she forgot, or maybe this happened this is something that didn't sit with me. It does not mean that I love this book any less. We have talked about how toxic we find Tamlin in this book. You could watch this first season and say, wow, they have been super negative about this book. But I will go to the line about this book series. I tell everyone, this is my favorite SJM series, ACOTAR. It's the one that introduced me to romantasy. It's the one that I fell in love with. Throne of Glass is my favorite book series ever. And there is a difference because I think it transcends the author. But I don't think she would take offense knowing that we are coming to it from a place of love.
I'm so happy to hear that you've said that about what we are doing, because in my heart, what you just said aloud is how I feel. Because if we did not love these stories, adore every single character arc that we can talk about as much as we try and talk about, if we didn't like it, we wouldn't have made the podcast, right?
Right.
Like,
I mean, we're not, and we, how much have we laughed during this season? How much have we,
how much joy has she brought us?
Right. For years, for just one book series. And how excited are we to read book 2? How excited are we to look at book 3 and to see these connections? This is the first seed of this podcast plant, right? Like, now we get to start doing the back comparisons to where it all started for us. And I think that this is just a really cool opportunity. And I think one of the things that has surprised me is how much I remember, but how much I don't remember, how much I'm relearning. I'll speak only for myself on that part.
We if we've watched anything about this past season, we know it's that I can't remember. And it's not because the things are not memorable. God, it's because of the opposite. There is so much that is so memorable that I'm trying to keep in my head and catalog. I know I don't remember everything,
but also
one of us does.
We have read so many books in the last 4 years. Like, the first year I met you, I read 105 books that year. I haven't read that many since, but like, I have read anywhere from 75 to 100 books every year for the last 4 years. That's a lot, and a lot of them have been romantasy or fantasy or romance. That's a lot. That's a lot of worlds to remember.
I always say, like, Kat, we all know I don't remember anything. Ha 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 ha. It's because Pride and Prejudice is the original romance book, and so many books have been written after that, like I mentioned earlier, Harlequin romance. Trying to separate all those different stories out is difficult because they are so similar. SJM is the original author of romantasy novels, and there have been so many things that have come after that are very similar, and I'm not saying those books are not good. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying sometimes things blend together. And so she should take it as a compliment that if there are so many books that resemble, so many books that maybe might have relationship to what she wrote, it's not a negative.
I think of it this way. I can think of 4 book series that have a character named Azriel. I first encountered that name in this book series, or Cassian, or something that is related to Cassian, or other characters that you just, their names are so similar, or their powers are so similar. The Shadow Daddy, right?
Or the girl with the firepower. Because we will get into that in future years of our podcast about girls with firepower.
But it's hard to remember, okay, I know Azriel's in this book. Is he, and he's also, but which Azrael am I thinking of? Because they all have shadow powers and they all have dark hair and they all love this type of, like, it's just, it's easy to forget. And I think, I mean, that's why we're creating the encyclopedia, to be able to look back and create and see these connections, but also just remember the books that we love so much.
Can I move on to a insanely different topic?
I would love it if you did.
Overall, the growth of our characters in this.
That was one of mine.
I want to talk about Feyre, Nesta, Lucian, and Tamlin. Specifically, those four characters, because I feel like Nesta specifically, it's our impression of Nesta. The only ones we get to like firsthand witness are Feyre, Lucian, and Tamlin. But what are some of your thoughts? I feel like we don't get to judge Rhys appropriately in this book. That's why I didn't ask him in my question. But if you want to include him, girl, let me push my glasses up. I am never not here for Rhys.
Well, but he's different in this book, right? Like, he's different when we first meet him at Calamni and the Spring Court versus that last scene in the cell where the mask is off, so to speak. We do
like,
see
prideful Rhys versus like vulnerable Rhys.
I wouldn't say prideful. I would say showy Rhys. The Rhys that he has to be to maintain equilibrium and to maintain where he is, versus the one point where he just goes in with his head in his hands and he's like, I just need a moment to myself, and this is the only place they're not going to find me.
Like,
that is
this
a different
is my broom
character.
closet that I can hide in.
Right. No one, and I can talk to you because no one's going to listen to you. That is a huge character difference from there you are, I've been looking for you, and fighting Tamlin, making Tamlin grovel on his hands and knees, to sitting with his head in his hands.
Yeah.
But I think it is interesting when we think of Nesta, because I always think of Nesta, like you said a few episodes ago, Nasty Nesta from Silver Flames.
Love it. I wish that was my nickname. I wish people called me Nasty Nesta.
But that's not the Nesta that we see here. The Nesta we see here is a protector. That is who we see in Silver Flames, but that's not what immediately comes to mind. And this is the villain Nesta, because that's how Feyre views her.
But also, Feyre doesn't always view her as a villain. How many times do we actually see, when we are looking at it under this microscope, that Feyre has positive things to say about Nesta and not negative?
And how, and Nesta is also the one who was stronger than Tamlin. I mean, I think that I remembered it before, but that I didn't remember the significance of it. Of her saying, I don't know what he did, but it did not work on me. I remembered everything. But Nesta, I think what's interesting in her character arc is Nesta doesn't really change. Nesta stays the same. She's the protector of Elaine. She does not handle anyone's attitude towards her. She does not care what people think about her.
Okay, so how about our three main characters, about Feyre, Lucian, and Tamlin? What did you think about their character growth arcs? And what I would put a limit on this is, don't think about where they're going in the next, all the books. Just limit your opinions into the character growth of these characters in this book.
I think Feyre and Lucian have the biggest arcs. Feyre goes from hating the Fae, from fearing the Fae, to becoming one. And regretting, not just regretting her decision, but actively fighting the last trial where she has to kill 3 of them. That is a big character arc change for her. I think Lucian changes from when we first meet him and he's almost mocking her for her humanity and her humanness, to when he sees that she has died, he drops his sword and curses. He says, oh no, or something like that. Like, he has grown to have an affection for her. Tamlin is the one that I struggle with, because his difference, I don't know how big of a character difference we see in him. He's still angry. The last thing his last act is to kill. It is the other High Lords that start the process of saving her life. And I don't know that his character really does much change. What about you? What do you think about their character changes?
I think our impression of Nesta is so much greater than any time we have read it or discussed it before. I think we're analyzing it with so much more detail from the perception of the reader. And honestly, that is dictated by the author. The author only gives us the information that she gives us. So the reader has to take it upon themselves to decide how much attention are they paying to Nesta and how much attention are they paying to the rest of the words that are in any given chapter where Nesta is written. So I feel like you have to really think about not even that you have to think about. You don't have to think about it. It's not your job. You're reading this book for fun.
But I think the other thing to think about in regard to Nesta in particular is everything is through Feyre's point of view. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about character changes, how much does she change? Because we learn that Feyre's wrong. Feyre repeatedly is like, oh, I bet Nesta's really happy that I'm gone. Oh, but she's really enjoying the space in the bed. In reality, Nesta was trying to get to her. And that is not a character change. That is the character. But we don't know much more until we learn more from her perspective.
My opinions on Feyre, Lucien, and Tamlin. I feel like for Feyre, she grows up a little bit. I'm a 40-year-old lady, right? Who am I to speak to what I think these changes are is what a 30-year-old lady might be reading versus a 20-year-old lady versus a 16-year-old lady.
Right.
All of us are reading this from different perspectives. What do I see in my age group as a 40-year-old lady that changes of Feyre? I see her starting out as this very single-minded person. And by the end of this book, her mind is open so much to so many different perspectives. And that's not just having friends that have other people's perspective, but how her growth changes her own perspective. She now sees things differently than she did because she has more experiences, she has more education, she has more interaction with other people that are not like her. So like her mind broadens. So of course she's going to have this character growth. The character growth that I see in Lucien, that's really, really hard for me to say because I know Lucien in later books and I'm trying to like push that out of my brain. But what I see is him getting to know a human for the first time, and little by little we just cut away as if we were making a sculpture out of stone. We're just nicking these little pieces out a little bit at a time. So it's a really, really slow arc of his character to understand and respect a human, where he starts out being like, you killed Andrés. Also knowing that Lucien knew that they were sending Andrés out to get killed. So that's a lot for like one person to take in, I think. But then Tamlin, I do not think I see that much character growth in that he kind of has these ideals and expectations at the beginning of the book. And while he may have changed and be like, okay, I love this girl now, I don't think his ideals and expectations of anyone around him or of Feyre or of himself have changed that much. I don't see that much growth in Tamlin.
And I think looking forward, especially for Tamlin, we see that he is still the same Tamlin. When he has the tithe in book 2, it's what they've always done. Even though
is this where they get the wraiths that are in the pond, like giving them the stuff? Is that what? Okay,
like
gotcha.
He's like, no, you owe me money. This is why we've always done it. There's no accommodation for the fact that for the last 49 years, people have been under the mountain. He doesn't care because this is the tradition. He does things. So I think his arc will be an interesting one to watch because he does change through the 3 books. By the 3rd book, he does. I mean, it's the mirror to this book. It ends with all of the High Lords giving a piece of their magic to Rhys, including Tamlin. My last question is, now that we have this one book, what do you think are the main themes of this particular book? We've talked about it throughout the season, but does anything jump out at you that you didn't realize before?
Oh, wow. How about this has a lot to do with classism or like a caste system that I don't think you and I have talked about before, about some people thinking that they are better than other people by their expectations of these different caste systems. Like Amarantha being the most powerful, thinking that she can overpower the Fae, and then the Fae thinking they're more powerful and they can overpower the humans. And then, to be honest, the humans who are like regular humans that are just moving around the world and are not that well off, but they're not so poor that they're starving, which is kind of where Feyre's at. But like, then we also get the class system of Feyre and her family being more intelligent than the children of the Blessed, who are like trying to think that they're like higher in the system because they're going to go to the Fae, but they're actually the lowest in the system. But I definitely think there is a caste/class system represented in who's in power and who's not in power, and who's vulnerable and who's most vulnerable with this situation. I hope you kind of get what I'm saying about there being like this hierarchy of people who think they're in charge.
But also, I think like when you're looking at that power, we've said it before, the humans are at the lowest ranking in the power system, but it's a human that's going to be the one that saves them.
But also, like in a weird way, keep in mind that human gets turned into a Fae, so it still puts humans as lower in the caste system.
It has stripped her of her identity. The thing that she has identified for, 400 pages of this book is taken away from her after she has done the thing that saves the world. And I don't think we see that a lot in this genre. We don't see the transformation happen a lot.
Really? You don't think that? Because I feel like that is stereotypical of every book of
the female changing
that we read. That there is a female who is a human who gets superpowers and then becomes super powerful, and she's more powerful than everyone else. I feel like that is stereotypical romantasy.
There's a difference in getting powers and changing your species, I think, for me, because she becomes the thing that she hated.
No, I do see that. I see that. I don't know if I have much to speak to that, but that's just the point. As she changes species, she becomes something, quote, better, unquote. And all the other humans are still left as this, like, lower species. Like,
but she also becomes something worse because she becomes a Fae, the thing that the humans hate. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that really stuck with me was the theme of home for all of this. Like, the idea of home changes so much throughout this book.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it really does. Oh, man. Yeah, I didn't think about that yet, but yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, and her home was her prison. Her home was never really a home.
And the thing that she thinks is her home now.
Right.
I mean, TBD. We'll
also,
figure that out.
It's not the place that she dreams of. Yeah, like it's the idea of home is a big thing.
I think that goes hand in hand with the themes of hunger and vulnerability, right? Like as her home changes, her need for food changes. Like we talked about that just literally on episode 1, how big of a theme that was. And I think that that is representative of access.
Well, and wealth.
Yeah, like wealth equals access. When she is younger, she has no education, she has no access. She gets older, she becomes a hunter, and then suddenly she gets sucked into this whole thing that she never wanted to be part of. But she starts getting access to more power, more wealth, and even though it doesn't really intensely happen until she gets to Night Court next book, she starts getting more education, but she does start getting pampered. She has these dresses. She has this food. Like,
yeah, that is really all I
have
for
a
my
couple
questions.
unanswered questions. These are not going to be able to be answered by us. They're just questions that is like food for thought. Neither you nor I can answer these questions, nor can any of the readers. I think the only person that could answer these questions are SJM, but I'm going to throw them out there. I have one is head in the spring garden.
Right.
What's the deal behind that? Why did we have Valeris, and what did that mean? We don't get answers. 2, Amarantha's obsession with Feyre's name. We never got that answered.
Yeah.
3, why is the Starlight Pond in existence in Springcourt? 4, that time when Tamlin said, I know what day it is.
Yeah.
And so if we're doing a book recap, those are my unanswered questions.
There are definitely things that have been left, but there are also things that make me want to like keep paying attention to. Maybe there's going to be a Starlight Pond in another book series.
We do still have more books where all of these questions could be answered, and you and I would have to eat our words and be like, well, we were wrong. We thought she just forgot about these things, but nope, they were kernels. Or we could be wrong in that we invested too much time into this and thought this was too important, and it really was not that important, guys. Why did you spend that much time on it? Like,
we'll never know.
That could also easily be the answer. Hey, Kat, is there anything that I did not talk about yet that you want to talk about?
No, I think this was a fun little episode.
I think it was a fun recap.
Although we do have an announcement to make. As of next season, we are going to be posting every 2 weeks rather than every week, just so that we can be creating the encyclopedia to the level that we want, and so that we are creating a podcast that we are both happy with, but also are able to live our lives. Where our next episode will be coming out on February 24th.
Yeah, Kat, I think that sounded like a perfect explanation. We are trying to do our best for ourselves and also for the encyclopedia. And also, we really love this podcast and want to do it the best. And what do you think, Kat? Like, any questions, any suggestions, any comments? We'd love it, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys know where to find us. sjmasterclass@gmail.com and sjmasterclass on Instagram. 2 A's in mass.
All right. Hey, Kat. I'd say, do you want to go get Margs? But what I'm going to say is, hey, can I see you next season?
I'll see you in season 2, Rev.
I will
And we'll be reading the second book A Court of Mist and Fury.
I can't believe we're already starting A Court
We're
of
there,
Mist and
baby!
Fury. We're already there. We already finished season 1. This is insane.
That's wild. It's wild.
Okay. I will see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.